Okay. Inshallah, it's working now. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen wassalatu wassalam ala abdillahi wa rasulih Nabiyyina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. So we're continuing with our weekly Q&A session. We're a little bit late in starting today. I was just in the middle of filming some more of the episodes for Al-Madrasatul Umariyah with the AMAU course that we're running, and that meant we were a little bit late getting started. So this is a very, very good question, and subhanAllah, the number of questions have gone up to 213 and I'm on 129, so I'm subhanAllah, I hope there's a lot of repetitions in there for us to get through them. The first question: what is your view on the name Lut? Should people start naming their children with it in order to break free from negative stereotypes? Also, why is the word liwat derived from Lut? Is it not disrespectful to the name? So first of all, the name Lut is a name of a prophet, and all of the names of the prophets are good, alayhim salatu wassalam. However, because of the negative stereotypes around this name, and because this name is associated with the people of Lut, which it shouldn't be, I believe that a parent shouldn't name their child Lut, because it could create difficulty for that child, and there are other names from the names of the prophets they can choose, but it could create great difficulty for the child. The child might be bullied because of it. So I don't believe that a child should be named Lut, even though there's nothing wrong with the name, and Lut was a noble prophet alayhi salatu wassalam, but because of the negative stereotypes around the name, and because of the fact that that the people of Lut are associated with what they did, then I think that it's not wise for a parent to name their child Lut. However, I also disagree with the word liwat being used for homosexuality, and I think it should be instead referred to as fi'lu qawmi Lut, the action of the people of Lut. And I don't think that deriving a word out of the name Lut is the correct thing to do, and Allah Azza wa Jalla knows best. And I heard some of our mashayikh say this, and I haven't done a great big study on who said it and who didn't, or who was the first person to use the word, but personally I dislike that the name Lut should be, the word for homosexuality should be taken from the word Lut, because it's not correct to attribute that to Lut alayhi salatu wassalam. Instead, it should be called fi'lu qawmi Lut, the action of the people of Lut, and Allah Azza wa Jalla knows best. You mentioned previously that in most cases the urine leak stops after a short period of time, and so the wudu can then be taken in the prayer prayed. What about the small leakage of seminal fluid after having relations? It can last for an hour and sometimes for a few hours. Can a person pray with a pad or a tissue rather than wait? The reality of this is that the fluid which comes out after intimacy or after urination, this fluid most of the time is the same fluid, and it's a fluid which requires wudu. It breaks the wudu, but it doesn't require the ghusl. It doesn't require ghusl, it only breaks the wudu. So if a person made ghusl after intimacy and then some fluid came after that, this fluid requires wudu, not ghusl. And as for it lasting for a long time, then I don't think the person is in one of two situations. Either there is enough time left for the prayer, or there is not enough time left for the prayer. If there is enough time left for the prayer, they should delay the prayer, make wudu, and then pray. But if there is not enough time left with the tissue, if there is not enough time left for the prayer, then they should make wudu, put the tissue, make wudu, and pray as they are, if there is not enough time left for the prayer. What about in Jumu'ah, where you have to leave the house early? So leave the house early and let them make wudu in the masjid. And let them, the person is saying you can't, if you leave for Jumu'ah early, then you can't give a gap between wudu and between going to the toilet. That's not the case. A person who suffers from this problem needs to be organized. If they know they're having a problem of leakage or urination or whatever it is, then the person needs to be organized. Go to the toilet plenty of time and give yourself time to wait, make wudu, and then go out for Jumu'ah. And this is more important than being in the masjid early. Or go to the masjid early, and then when you're in the masjid, go out and make wudu again, and so on. But a person, and in this situation, the idea that going to Jumu'ah early means that I pray without wudu, that's not, or without proper wudu, that's not a correct understanding. That you should, I'm not going to have a proper wudu, but I'm going to go to Jumu'ah early. Because the wudu is wajib and going to Jumu'ah early is mustahab, is recommended. Did Aisha radiallahu anha rebel against the ruler in the disagreement with Ali radiallahu anh? Are there not documented instances of the salaf rebelling against the rulers, and was this principle of obeying the ruler not followed during the time of al-fitna? There is no doubt that Aisha radiallahu anha, she did not rebel against the ruler radiallahu anha wa ardaha. If the person had said Abdullah ibn Zubayr, or had said Al-Husayn ibn Ali radiallahu anhum ajma'in, you could have gone into a bit of detail. But Aisha radiallahu anha, there is no way to include this in rebellion. Rather, what Aisha did is she went out for islah, to make islah between the two armies. She went because she thought that as the wife of the Prophet ﷺ, from the most beloved of the Muslims, that the Muslims love the most, that we had the most love for, that the two fighting armies would make peace because of Aisha radiallahu anha. And this was not something that she did which was against the command of the ruler or was an act of rebellion against the ruler. As for the fighting that happened, this fighting that happened was among the munafiqeen. The munafiqeen, they were present in the army of Ali radiallahu anh, and some were present with Aisha's group, and they fired at each other in order to make them fight against one another. But there is no way that you can argue that Aisha rebelled against the ruler. As for saying that there are instances among the salaf of rebelling against the ruler, then this I will say yes. There are some instances. Like Shaykh al-Islam ibn Taymiyyah rahimahullah ta'ala, he mentioned that the ijma' it came after Ibn al-Ash'ath, who rebelled against al-Hajjaj ibn Yusuf al-Thaqafi. And this, before then, there was ikhtilaf among people. And some people, they held that there were some exceptions to it. Although even the answer of Abdullah bin Zubayr, you can't really claim that it's rebellion against the ruler. Because in the first place, Abdullah bin Zubayr never entered into the pledge of allegiance in the first place. He didn't enter into the pledge of allegiance in the first place. And as regard to Al-Husayn ibn Ali radiallahu anh, then also it's hard to really document this as a rebellion. However, what you can say is that the matter was not settled and completely without debate until Ibn al-Ash'ath. And when Ibn al-Ash'ath rebelled against al-Hajjaj ibn Yusuf, from that moment on, the ijma' was there, consensus that rebellion against the ruler, it can never bring any good. And the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ are enough for us in this. Wallah, looking for exceptions and looking for ways out and looking for fulan did this and fulan did that. But ultimately the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ are so clear in this regard. And the ijma' of the salaf, which happened, as Ibn Taymiyyah rahimahullah ta'ala said, after Ibn al-Ash'ath, his rebellion against al-Hajjaj ibn Yusuf, the rebellion in which Imam al-Sha'bi rahimahullah ta'ala, he said, مَا كُنَّا بَرَرَةً أَقْوِيَا وَلَا فَجْرَةً. He said, مَا كُنَّا بَرَرَةً أَتْقِيَا وَلَا فَجْرَةً أَقْوِيَا. We were not righteous enough to overcome you, nor were we powerful enough to overcome you. After this rebellion, you don't find from among the Salaf anyone who held rebellion against the ruler in any situation, fil fitna or fi ghayr al fitna, in fitna or in any other time. Rather, in the situation of fitna, it's more, the command to obey is more important because of the danger of spilling the blood and the evil that happened. And that's why Shaykh al-Islam ibn Taymiyyah, he said there has almost never been known any group that went out against the ruler except they caused more corruption than they sought to correct. And subhanAllah, if you look at this statement of Shaykh al-Islam, is daqiq jiddan, is very precise what he said, Shaykh al-Islam rahimahullah ta'ala, that he said that there is almost no group ever in the history of mankind has rebelled against a ruler and brought about more good than the evil that they brought. And this is talking about in the situation of the Muslims, and the situation where the person is talking about rebelling against the ruler, in the situation where the ruler is, in the situation of which we're talking about here, rebellion against the ruler, it doesn't bring any good. It doesn't bring, and that's why even the ulama, they put conditions for rebelling against the kafir. They even said rebelling against the kafir, it has conditions. And from the conditions is that the person is able to do so, and that they have ghalabatul dhann, that they will be able to overcome them and instill a Muslim in their place, and that it doesn't bring about more corruption than it seeks to correct. So even if they put conditions for rebelling against the disbeliever, let alone the situation of the believer. And I translated a long article on this, which might still be available online, which is the effect of rebellion over the history of Islam, over the history of Islam. So inshallah ta'ala, a person could refer to that, the effect of rebellion during the history of Islam. Is it permissible to wear the niqab and jilbaab secretly from my parents because they don't want me to wear it? So this question, first of all, we say that there is a principle that all of us need to be aware of, and that principle is لا طاعة لمخلوق في معصية الخالق. There is no obedience to creation in disobedience to the Creator. So for this sister, we say to her that you can't obey your parents in something which is haram. So obviously the niqab is a matter the scholars differ over. Some of them held it to be fard, and some of them held it to be mustahab, recommended. However, the correct opinion is that it is fard. Inshallah, this is the opinion that we believe to be the stronger opinion. It's the opinion that is indicated by the Quran and the Sunnah and the statements of the salaf rahimahumullah ta'ala, is that the niqab is fard. So if we say that the niqab is fard, and the person believes that, then it's not allowed for them to obey their parents in not wearing it. And they should disobey their parents in a good way, in a way that brings their parents good, and they try to explain to them softly and kindly, but they should wear it regardless of whether their parents agree or don't agree. And in this, the jilbaab, of course, there is no difference of opinion on the jilbaab, that it is obligatory for the woman to cover her whole body. And there is no difference of opinion in that. So definitely, for sure, is no doubt that the sister, she should be wearing the jilbaab. If she feels extreme pressure from the parents, and she fears for herself, and if she can get away with just the jilbaab and the hijab, and then she puts the niqab on out of the house, then perhaps this is acceptable in a situation where she fears a lot from them. But otherwise, I believe that in most situations, it's not the situation that she really fears to that extent, but it's that they will create a big problem for her, they will shout, they will say things, but ultimately they will not physically stop her from wearing it. So if that's the case, then she should disobey them and wear it, but she should explain to them in the softest words and the kindest way. As Allah Azza wa Jal said, فَلَا تُطِعْهُمَا وَصَاحِبْهُمَا فِي الدُّنْيَا مَعْرُوفًا. Don't obey them, but accompany them in this world in the best way. The niqab is something we could maybe be somewhat more flexible about, bearing in mind there's a difference of opinion among the scholars. So if she was to maybe start with the jilbab, and then to just put the niqab on after she leaves the house at school or work, for example, and just to, when she sees her parents, just to wear the jilbab, and then to introduce the niqab to them slowly, then inshallah ta'ala this would be acceptable. But as for the jilbab, she has to disobey them on it, and she has to wear it no matter what. And she has to work towards that with regard to the niqab as well, and Allah Azza wa Jalla knows best. So the question is regarding a hadith, that the hadith is that if the woman, she prays her 5 daily prayers, إِذَا صَلَّتْ خَمْسَهَا and she guards her chastity, and she obeys her husband, وَأَطَاعَتْ بَعْلَهَا, and she will be allowed, it will be said to her, enter from any of the doors of Jannah that you wish. Can this include a woman who was unchaste before marriage when she was not practicing Islam, but now is practicing Islam and is married and faithful and obedient to her husband? Yes, I think this can include this woman, inshaAllah ta'ala, because the tawbah wipes out the sins that came before, and the person who has sincerely repented to Allah Azza wa Jal, that person Allah Azza wa Jal said, يُبَدِّلُ اللَّهُ سَيِّئَاتِهِمْ حَسَنَاتٍ. Allah will replace the evil that they did with good deeds. So there is no reason why, if the person after they got married, they made tawbah for what they did and they were sincere in their regret to Allah, and they're now obedient to the husband and faithful, then there is no reason why this woman, she can't be from the people who is mentioned in the hadith, enter from any of the doors of paradise that you wish. Because tawbah wipes out the sins that came before, and all of us need to be aware of that. Whatever sins we did before, tawbah wipes them out. Otherwise, subhanAllah, if you think about the one who is a revert to Islam, they, subhanAllah, the one who's a revert to Islam, they lived a life prior to Islam of every kind of sin you can imagine. Because they didn't pray their prayers, they worshipped others besides Allah, they didn't accept Islam, they didn't recognize the rights of the messengers, and yet after Islam all of that is wiped away. And that is the case of tawbah. When a person turns to Allah Azza wa Jal, it wipes out what was before it, and it wipes out the mistakes that a person made, and Allah replaces the bad deeds that they did with good deeds. So this is a question regarding a person who him and his wife have applied to study Islam abroad, and they're hoping to find out if they've been accepted after Ramadan. So we ask Allah Azza wa Jal to make it easy for them, and we ask Allah Azza wa Jal to make them a benefit to others, and we ask Allah to benefit them and to make them a benefit to others. What would be the advice if we get accepted? So this is a beautiful question. I'm going to expand this advice to whether you get accepted or whether you don't get accepted. My advice is that you stick to seeking knowledge whatever your situation is. And that's why it was said to Abdullah ibn Mubarak, it was said to him that if Allah revealed to you that you أَنَّكَ تَمُوتُ الْعَشِيَّةِ, that you're going to die tonight, if Allah revealed to you that you're going to die tonight, فَمَا أَنْتَ صَانِعْ فَمَاذَا أَنْتَ صَانِعْ, what will you do? قَالَ أَقُومُ وَأَطْلُبُ الْعِلْمِ, he said, I will stand up and I'm going to seek knowledge. حَتَّى يَأْتِيَنِيَ الْمَمَاتِ, until the death comes to me. So subhanAllah, that's how the early generations they used to be. Don't wait for acceptance to seek knowledge. Don't wait for an opportunity to go abroad to seek knowledge. Seek knowledge wherever you are, in whatever situation you are, with the best that you have. Because ultimately, if you have an idea to delay seeking knowledge until you're accepted, first of all, that acceptance might not come, or it might be delayed, or the situation when you reach there might not be the one that you thought it would be. Like we recently mentioned the story of Al-Abbar with Qutaybah ibn Sa'id, rahimahumullah, where he was going to go to Qutaybah, but his mum didn't let him go. And then after his mum passed away, he tried to reach Qutaybah. And when he reached Balkh, it reached him that Qutaybah had died, rahimahullah ta'ala. So he wasn't able to seek that knowledge. So a person ultimately, but he did so for a good reason. But the point is that a person might think they're going to get an opportunity to seek knowledge, but that opportunity might not come to them when they thought that it would come to them. So in this case, a person should try to seek knowledge with everything that is available to them, study hard right now, and so on. But my advice in terms of someone who's looking to study is going to be based into 2 or 3 very simple points. Number 1, there is a way to study. There's a method for studying. Whoever takes that road will be successful, inshallah. And whoever misses that road will not be successful if they study for 1,000 years. And that for me, even in myself, when I look at myself, whatever I was able to do of good, that was whenever I followed that road. And whenever I distanced myself from that road because I got sidetracked with something, or I went a different way, or I tried a different method, I failed. So this road is the methodology of the salaf al-salih, of the righteous people who came before us in talab al-ilm, in seeking knowledge. How did the righteous people before us used to seek knowledge? And for this, I would highly recommend a book. And I believe it is the best book written on this topic. And Allah Azza wa Jalla knows best. And it is called Ta'zeem al-Ilm. Ta'zeem al-Ilm. It is the best short book, I should say, written. Otherwise, there are other books which are long. But in terms of a short summary, it's a book called Venerating or Honoring Knowledge by Sheikh Salih al-Usaymi, Hafidhahullah Ta'ala. I've made an explanation of this book twice. Once was a summarized version and once was a bit more detailed. The more detailed one, we did it in Coventry, but I don't know where the video is. And the short one we did in Newcastle Central Mosque, and I'm also not sure if the video was kept. But I believe that Sheikh Abdurrahman Hassan has an explanation on Al-Madrasatul Umariyah of this book, Ta'zeem al-Ilm, Venerating Knowledge by Sheikh Salih al-Usaymi, Hafidhahullah Ta'ala. This book, honestly, it gives you everything you need on how to seek knowledge. And if a person can't find it, but they suffice themselves with Hilyat Talib al-Ilm by Sheikh Bakr Abu Zayd, the Etiquettes of Seeking Knowledge by Sheikh Bakr Abu Zayd, this is also a very good book as well. But it's a little bit more difficult to understand. Hilyat Talib al-Ilm by Sheikh Bakr Abu Zayd is a bit more difficult to understand than Ta'zeem al-Ilm by Sheikh Salih al-Usaymi, Hafidhahullah Ta'ala. So I would recommend a person, before they start studying, they go through this book, so they understand the road to knowledge. Because honestly, if I told you the amount of time that we wasted, wallahi, looking for knowledge in here and there, and then realizing that the path to it is not what we thought. And honestly, I feel that when I read the book Ta'zeem al-Ilm, that for me, it just settled it for me. It answered all my outstanding questions about how to seek knowledge. I'm going to bring you two benefits from this book. And then I'm going to mention a third thing that's very important. The first benefit that I'm going to bring you from this book is the basic principle of the book. And that is, the more you honor knowledge, the more knowledge you will get. That's the principle. The more you honor knowledge, the more knowledge you will get. The more time you give it, the more status you give it, the more you take it seriously about being sincere, the more you strive for it, the more you take it from the people that it should be taken from, the more that you give it its respect, and the more you do that, the more knowledge you will get. And anyone who got knowledge only got knowledge because they honored knowledge. And anyone who lost out on knowledge, to a greater or lesser degree, they only lost out on it because they didn't venerate it and honor it. They didn't give it its proper position in the sight of Allah Azza wa Jal. So honoring knowledge and giving knowledge its proper position, that's what gets you knowledge. And then I'm going to quote to you a line of poetry. The line of poetry, it was in Alfiyat al-Sanad. Sheikh Salih al-Usaymi mentions it in his book. It's from Alfiyat al-Sanad. And the poet, he said, فَمَا حَوَى الْغَايَةَ فِي أَلْفِ سَنَةٍ شَخْصٌ فَخُذْ مِنْ كُلِّ فَنٍ أَحْسَنَ بِحِفْظِ مَتْنٍ جَامِعٍ لِلْرَاجِحِ تَأْخُذُهُ عَلَى مُفِيدٍ نَاصِحِ. He said, this is a summary of how to seek knowledge in one line or in two stanzas of poetry. He said, if you try to reach the destination, you'll not reach it in 1,000 years. If you try to read every book that has ever been written on Islam, in 1,000 years you will not be able to finish them. فَخُذْ مِنْ كُلِّ فَنٍ أَحْسَنَ. So in every separate science of Islam, take the best you can. You know, there are hundreds of books on Aqeedah, hundreds of books on fiqh, hundreds of books on hadith, hundreds of books on usul and so on. You have to choose the best ones and become extremely proficient in them. The other books you can read, because you read, you'll expand, mutala'a, reading, and just generally becoming more well-read. That's brilliant, but you have to become proficient in certain books that you chose because they are excellent. The best book that I can choose in fiqh at each level, I want to know it inside out, maybe even memorize it, know the issues from the front to the back, like the back of my hand. And then the other books, I read them and I benefit from them, but I bring my knowledge back to those core books. So for example, in this, you have, let's just say in Tawheed al-Uluhiyyah, the Tawheed of worshipping Allah alone, you have Kitab al-Tawheed. And Kitab al-Tawheed by Shaykh Muhammad bin Abdul Wahhab, rahimahullah ta'ala, the best explanation is either Taysir al-Aziz al-Hamid or Fath al-Majid. And I would say Taysir al-Aziz al-Hamid because Shaykh Abdul Razak al-Badr said to us it's the best explanation of Kitab al-Tawheed, but it's not complete. So if a person either takes Fath al-Majid or Taysir al-Aziz al-Hamid, now this is my book. This is my book. You memorize Kitab al-Tawheed, you memorize it, and you take the book Fath al-Majid and you know it inside out. You know it so well, you even know what the footnotes are. You even know, you know that book from the front to the back. And then all the other things you benefit from in the other books. You've read about Tawheed, you copy them onto Fath al-Majid. So as if Fath al-Majid becomes your personal set of notes about Tawheed al-Uluhiyyah. You memorize Kitab al-Tawheed and all of the benefits you learn from the scholars. When you read other explanations, you read the Sharh of Shaykh Salih al-Shaykh, for example. It's amazing. The Sharh Tamheed. All the benefits you took, you wrote those benefits on the side of Fath al-Majid, along with Fath al-Majid. And so you have this one book, Fath al-Majid, where all of your notes on Tawheed al-Uluhiyyah are there. And you become mutamakkin, you become extremely precise and skilled in that particular book. That will be a very, very strong basis for you. Now, does that mean that's the only book? La wallah, you're going to read and read. You're going to read the Fatawa of Shaykh Islam ibn Taymiyyah, that section of Aqidah. You're going to read so many masail and issues. But ultimately, if your core is not there, if your base is not there, you're going to struggle when you come to the more complicated issues. And for example, someone says in their general Aqidah, maybe, for example, Al-Aqidah Al-Tahawiyah, and a person memorizes it. And then they take the sharh of Abil Izz Al-Hanafi rahimahullah ta'ala, and they take his explanation and all of the benefits from Aqidah that they learn elsewhere, they bring it into there. So where he mentions it and they benefit other things, they write references, see Majmu' al-Fatawa, chapter, whatever, book, volume, this, look at this, see the explanation of Shaykh so-and-so on this, and they bring the benefits together into one book or one set of notes that they gathered together, the general notes on Aqidah in that one book. Wallah, this is be an amazing methodology. Joining between hifth and fahm. بِحِفْظِ مَتْنٍ جَامِعٍ لِلرَّاجِحِ. Memorize the best text you can. Memorize the best text that you can. And when we say the best text, the text that is the most widely used. It doesn't have to be the best, like maybe you'll find a better one. Like for example, I give the example of Al-Waraqat. Personally, there are better texts in Usul al-Fiqh than Al-Waraqat. But Al-Waraqat, that's my personal opinion. But Al-Waraqat is so widely accepted and widely explained and so easy to find teachers and shuyukh and explanations for, that I think a person should memorize Al-Waraqat instead of some of the alternatives because it's better known. And then the final part, the poet said, تَأْخُذُهُ عَلَى مُفِيدٍ نَاصِحِ. Take it from a shaykh who is qualified and sincerely wants to benefit you. So you take this from the shaykh. And that's different from some of the more complicated books later on. Those books you might read in your own time, and the things you don't understand, you go back to your shaykh. But the core books, you have to take it from your shaykh. You take it from your shaykh, from his mouth to your hand, like that. You take it directly. Because then you're going to have that strong foundation that when you later on do your mutala'ah, your reading and your studying, then you're going to get that knowledge. And broadly speaking, I believe this is how people get knowledge. And I think that if you look at our mashayikh, our ulama, anyone who became a great scholar of Islam, you see this is how they did it. And anyone who went and studied and didn't, and wallah, I include myself at the front of those people, that you look at yourself and you see that this is whenever I didn't follow this methodology, Either I read it in my own time, I didn't take it from the sheikh. Or either I started going to complicated books before I understood the easy ones. Or either I didn't make, itqan of the book, that I knew it inside out. And then you see, okay, now go back and fix those problems. You go back and you try to fix them and you try to correct them. But this is ultimately what you see. And you have to have hifz and fahm, memorization and understanding. Don't just have understanding. This is also one big problem I had, is that I understood very easily the masail, but I struggled to keep them in my memory. So I was always had to have my notes. If I didn't have my notes, I just felt like I couldn't speak about the issue. So this is also a problem as well. So you have to join between these two things. If a person implements this, they take the best out of every science. They don't take everything in one go. Later on, if you've got spare time for reading, read anything you want, but they focus on the best in each science. So that's every science. Nobody getting specialized in Aqidah when in your first few years of study. Your specialization, let it come later. In the beginning, become expert at everything. Secondly, memorization of a text that is widely accepted. Take it from the mashayikh and the scholars and bring the knowledge you receive in other notes and things, bring it into one place. That doesn't have to be the book itself. Some people write on the margin of the book. Personally, I find it awkward writing on the margin of the book. I do see the benefit in it, but I do find it awkward. I prefer just to have notes. So I'll have my notes on Taysir al-Aziz al-Hamid, which in those notes, all the lectures of Kitab al-Tawheed, Tawheed al-Uluhiyya that I've heard, the books I've read, I bring it all into there. So that's my one reference point. And you take it from the mashayikh and from the ulama, from the scholars and the people of knowledge. That is the road to success, inshallah ta'ala. The last point I want to mention on this issue is the Arabic language. Al-Imam al-Shatibi, rahimahullah ta'ala, when he mentioned in al-Muwafaqat, when he mentioned the condition for being a mujtahid, for being a scholar who is qualified to give a fatwa without reference to anyone, like from his own mind, he can give a fatwa like that. Shatibi only mentioned two conditions. One of them was the Arabic language, and the second one was understanding the maqasid of Sharia, understanding the purposes behind Islamic legislation. So what I want to focus here is Arabic. Without Arabic, native Arabic, you cannot be a scholar. It's impossible for you to be a scholar in any reasonable definition of the word without native Arabic. That is Arabic, that is either, like Ash-Shatibi said, he has to be Arabi, he has to be an Arab, or he has to be in the position of an Arab. Like either he is like an Arab in his fluency or he is Arab himself. Otherwise, he cannot be a scholar in the definition of the word. So I believe it's fundamental that a person works very, very hard in Arabic. And not just to the level of basic fluency, which is, again, I think I made this mistake. Like we reached what we would say is basic fluency or intermediate fluency, where you're fluent and you read anything and you don't find it difficult to understand and you can listen, but without really excelling, to go to the level where you are completely indistinguishable from a native speaker. That's what you have to aim for. And that's what Shatibi, he said, obviously I'm not quoting him, but that's what he said in general, rahimahullah ta'ala, that the two conditions for a person to reach the level of ijtihad are native fluency in the Arabic language and understanding the purposes of Islamic legislation. So I would say very, very important to give the importance to Arabic and proficiency in it. And if a person brings these together, memorization, understanding, taking from the scholars, fluency in Arabic, bringing all of the knowledge into the core books that you study, choosing the best books in every science, and then going out and reading and studying and researching, inshallah that person will reach their destination, however long it takes them. And ultimately, all of us are on the road. We don't claim to have reached the end. And in fact, no one can claim to reach the end. The end path, it's not a destination you reach. But like some of the salaf, they said, rahimahullah ta'ala, the goal is to die on the road, not to reach the destination. There's no destination you reach where you say, I've reached now, you're knowledgeable, that's it. Seeking knowledge is a continuous path. The aim is only to die on the road. That's what the goal and the aim is, and Allah Azza wa Jalla knows best. Can the Qunoot dua be read in witr every time? Allahumma hdini fi man hadayt, and Allahumma inni a'udhu bi ridaka min sakhatik. And like Shaykh Ibn Uthaymeen mentioned, to send the salawat upon the Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. Are we restricted to these du'as, or can we read any du'a that we know? So first of all, the scholars differed over the issue of continuity in the Qunoot, i.e. reading it all the time. So the Qunoot is the du'a you make in witr, and it's very famous in Ramadan. People know it in Ramadan when the Imam usually in the witr prayer, they raise the hands and everyone raises the hands. They say, Allahumma ahdina fi man hadayt, wa afina fi man afayt, wa tawallana fi man tawallayt. Some of them, they looked at this and they said that the Prophet ﷺ, it's not reported that he did this all the time. And others, they said, the fact that he taught this dua, Allahumma ahdini fi man hadayt, indicates that the intention behind it was for it to be regular. However, what I've heard from our mashayikh, and Allah Azza wa Jalla knows best, is that you shouldn't do it every time. You should have one time where you leave it off. Every now and again, leave it off. Because the Prophet ﷺ didn't do it every single time, and we don't have evidence that he did it in every single witr prayer. As for adding dua that you know, I don't know of any harm in that, inshaAllah ta'ala, that you can add to it from the du'as that you know. And the Prophet ﷺ said about the tashahhud, فَلْيَتَخَيَّرْ مِنَ الدُّعَاءِ أَعْجَبَهُ إِلَيْهِ. Let him choose from the dua the one that he likes it the most. There is no harm in the witr, inshaAllah, in adding to the dua and making whichever du'as that you want in it. Inshallah ta'ala, we don't know of any harm in that, and Allah Azza wa Jalla knows best. But sticking to the du'as from the sunnah is more deserving. And one of the things that I personally see is very sad in this day and age that we're in, is the exaggeration in the Qunoot in the witr. People making the Qunoot in the witr for 20 minutes long, 15 minutes long, and screaming, wailing, crying, all kinds of strange behavior that ma anzalallahu biha min sultan. Allah never sent down any authority for it. If a person is overcome by emotion, naturally that's a different matter. But we see even that they might bring the Imam to the masjid because the Imam is known for wailing in the Qunoot, for screaming and wailing in the Qunoot. And people might even download the du'as of the Imams to listen to because the Imam is known for wailing in the Qunoot, screaming and wailing and so on. And it's not from the etiquettes of du'a in the first place. It's not from the etiquettes of the du'a the Prophet ﷺ taught us. It's not from the etiquettes of the witr. It's not from the sunnah. And it's not from the hadith salaf rahimahullah ta'ala, from the guidance of the salaf as-salih rahimahullah ta'ala. So I don't like when this happens. I think let the du'a be reasonable length, yani short and according to the sunnah, and let the person, if they're overcome with emotion, there is no harm. But let not a person strive for that, like they're trying to wail and scream and things like that in the du'a. And we've seen the most strange things in this issue. So a person should try to stick to the du'as from the sunnah. And generally in du'a you should do that. I asked this question to Shaykh Abdul Razak al-Abbad hafidhullah ta'ala. I said to the Shaykh that we find many du'as that we make, and should it always be from the sunnah or not? Is it tawqifiyah? Does it have to be the way the Prophet ﷺ did it? And the Shaykh, he said to me that all ibadat are tawqifiyah. All ibadat have to be done the way the Prophet ﷺ did them. He said, but there is no harm in a person if you don't find a dua from the sunnah for what you want, and you wanted to ask Allah for something. And the Shaykh gave me an example. He said, like, you want to ask Allah for a neighbor who is, you want to ask Allah for a neighbor that you can learn knowledge from. He said there's no harm in you making that dua, but otherwise try to keep to the du'as that the Prophet ﷺ made and the etiquettes of dua. And wallah, if you look at the witr, you will see the imams doing things that are blatantly against the etiquettes of dua, like blatantly contradict the sunan with regard to dua in general, like making your dua like poetry. Right? This is not from the sunnah to make your dua like poetry, that you rhyme your dua like that and you make your dua like poetry. This is not from the etiquettes with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And it goes against the humility and the humbleness that you're supposed to have in front of Allah Azza wa Jal. Me personally, I don't even like reading the dua in like a melodious voice. I think the dua should be read in an ordinary voice. Allahumma ahdini fi man hadayt, wa afini fi man afayt, wa tawallani fi man tawallayt. I don't think it should be read like the Quran. But some of the scholars allowed it like that, with the melodious voice. I just personally think that it's not from the etiquettes of dua generally, that you read dua like that. And it leads to exaggeration, which is what we see from so many of the people in these days. Wallahu musta'an. After the witr, it's reported to say Subhan al-Malik al-Quddus 3 times and raise your voice in the third. Should this be done straight after the taslim and before the istighfar 3 times? The istighfar 3 times is only for the obligatory prayers, and Allah Azza wa Jalla knows best. So astaghfirullah, astaghfirullah, astaghfirullah. Allahumma anta salam wa minka salam tabarakta ya dhal jalali wal ikram. This is only for the obligatory prayers. That's what I know of, and Allah Azza wa Jalla knows best. So the Subhan al-Malik al-Quddus, you can say it straight after the salam in witr. If we pray witr as one unit, how should our sitting position be? Should it be with iftirash, like spread out, or should it be a tawarruk, like the normal sitting? I think it should be the tawarruk, and Allah Azza wa Jalla knows best. I think that the iftirash, where you spread yourself out in sitting, that should only be after the second, if there is 2 tashahhud. If there is 2 tashahhud in a prayer. And it's a matter where there is difference among the scholars, and the matter is not a matter, it's a sunnah in any case. But I personally believe that the iftirash, spreading yourself out, that should be when there is 2 tashahhud in the final one, and not in any tashahhud. And Allah Azza wa Jalla knows best. How should Muslims approach fostering? There are many ahadith about looking after orphans, but how do we practically do this due to mahram issues, especially if the child is past the breastfeeding age? I think fostering is very important and something we as Muslims we should give a great deal of attention to. Because there are a lot of Muslims who would get put with non-Muslim families if there aren't Muslim fosterers. So I really think it's extremely important for Muslims who are able to do this, whoever's able, whoever finds they fulfill the conditions and they have a raghba to do this good, they have a desire to do this good, they approach and they look at fostering, so that when the Muslim children are taken away from their parents, wal-iyadhu billah, we seek Allah's refuge from that the Muslim children taken away from their parents, that at least they find a good Muslim family that can take them on. In terms of mahram issues, there's no doubt those issues exist. And if the child is past the age of breastfeeding, there's no alternative to that. There's no way that the child can become like a mahram or something like that. There are only 2 ways to become for the mahram ties to be built. One is through blood ties, and one is through breastfeeding. And obviously the age of breastfeeding is that which is less than 2 years of age. So at that stage, the child can't build the mahram ties. So in this case, you have to manage the situation in the house. And that's why I think when you foster, you're given choices about age groups. You could look at the different age groups. Maybe you would only take the child who is younger than the age of puberty, for example, if that's the problem in your house. For some people, it's not a problem. They don't have children in the first place, for example. Or the issue that the woman is willing to just be careful about keeping her hijab, the wife, for example, she will keep her hijab on in the house, for example. But it may be that for someone who feels it will be a problem for them, they're worried about it, or they think it might be a problem for them, then this person, inshallah ta'ala, they maybe can request, as far as I remember from what I know of fostering, they can choose age groups, not a specific age, but they can choose like babies or toddlers or and so on. So the issue would be teenagers. And I think there should definitely be people that foster teenagers, because we need that in our community as well. But here there needs to be some thought about the mahram issues. How will it work? If it's a boy, if it's a girl, how will the father and so on, how will they keep? And it depends also on your house, if your house can accommodate that kind of room to keep them somewhat separate. Because at the end of the day, if Muslims live with, we have Muslim families living with brother-in-laws, sister-in-laws, and they manage to keep the hijab and separation, I don't see why it's any different for a foster child, but it just requires a lot of thought and planning. But for the majority of children in foster care, it's not a problem, because majority of children will be younger than the teenage years. So here there is some degree of flexibility, even though we would still want to see that separation happening at a younger age. Like, we're not saying that a 10-year-old shouldn't wear hijab, or a 10-year-old should be allowed to mix freely with a man who's not her mahram. But what we're saying is that at least the matter isn't a matter of halal and haram. So you can do it as much as you can, and when the rules break, sometimes the matter there can be some flexibility in it when it comes to fostering the younger children. For the teenage children, it requires a certain amount of space in the house and a certain amount of planning to make sure that there's a way to organize that. And often fostering is for a temporary amount of time anyway. So we're not talking about adoption here. Adoption is a different matter. But we're talking about fostering, which is usually a temporary amount of time. It could be short-term or long-term, as I remember from the fostering that I've seen people fostering before. Short-term could be like just a few days or a few weeks, and longer-term it could be like a year or 2 years or something like that. But hopefully that will give some inspiration. But a person needs to research it and specifically look at the issues that matter to them. Will the miracles and powers that Dajjal possesses and displays be based purely on science and illusions, or will they be real, similar to the miracles and powers given to the prophets alayhimus salatu wassalam? There is no doubt that what the Dajjal will have is more than just science. Allah Azza wa Jal will give the Dajjal an ability to cause a fitna, and from these things are things that are from what we would call kharq al-'ada. They are things that are not normal, they are paranormal, and they're not normal under the laws of the normal universe, like cutting a man in half and bringing him back together, or when he will take hold of the man's neck and it will become like molten copper and he will not be able to reach him, then he will throw him as though he's thrown him into paradise, or into the fire, but he's thrown him into paradise. And these are things that are not from the norms, but they're also not miracles like the miracles of the prophets alayhimus salatu wassalam, because the miracles of the prophets are unique to them, and that's why the word mu'jiza is only used for the prophets alayhimus salatu wassalam. However, it is from khawariq al-'ada, kharq al-'ada, from the things which is going against the norms of what Allah Azza wa Jal giving him something which is more than what is normal. Will any of it be more than illusion? Yes, the hadith indicate it will be more than illusion. It will not just be like illusionary magic, but it will be more than that, and Allah Azza wa Jal knows best. And that is why the fitna of the Dajjal is so severe, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows best. Will all Christians become Muslims when they see Isa, when he comes back? And will all of the Shia come back to the Sunnah when they see Imam Mahdi? Is there any basis for this, that they will just automatically rectify themselves? There is an ayah in the Quran regarding Isa, regarding Isa and Ahlul Kitab. I'm just trying to think. The statement of Allah Azza wa Jal in Surah An-Nisa, in which Allah Azza wa Jal said, وَإِن مِّنْ أَهْلِ الْكِتَابِ إِلَّا لَيُؤْمِنَنَّ بِهِ قَبْلَ مَوْتِهِ وَيَوْمَ الْقِيَامَةِ يَكُونُ عَلَيْهِمْ شَهِيدًا. There is none from the people of the book except that they will believe in Isa before his death. Here the scholars differed over this ayah and what it means, and whether qabla mawtihi refers to the death of the person from Ahl Kitab or the death of Isa, that everyone will believe in Isa before Isa dies, or that everyone will believe in Isa before that person dies. And there are a variety of different opinions about this. Some of them said that all of Ahl Kitab, they will believe in Isa before the death of Isa. Yani, because they will see the angels and they will see the truth, they will realize the truth of what was said. They will realize the truth that Isa was not the son of God, but that Isa was a prophet, and on the day of judgment he will be a witness over them. So there is some research in this ayah, وَإِن مِّنْ أَهْلِ الْكِتَابِ إِلَّا لَيُؤْمِنَنَّ بِهِ قَبْلَ مَوْتِهِ. It's ayah number 159 from Surah An-Nisa. However, regarding the Shia, I don't know of any evidence for that. Will seeing Isa cause them to believe? There is a narration regarding Isa alayhi salam that every disbeliever, something to do with, it's come from my mind at the moment, that every disbeliever that's from the sweat that is on his head, and that every disbeliever, but the narration has gone out of my mind. Let me see if I can find it quickly. It's gone out of my mind. If I can try to remember it, if I remember it later, I will mention it in another Q&A, inshallah. Something regarding the sweat of Isa, the droplets of perspiration from his hair, but it's gone out of my mind. Maybe I mentioned it in my lecture, the last lecture that I did on the Dajjal. I can't remember. It's gone out of my mind at the moment. But as for the Shia and Imam Mahdi, I don't know of any evidence for or against this. Allah Azza wa Jalla knows best. Can you tell us some ways from the Sunnah to increase our rizq? And it's a very beautiful question. It's very nicely worded. It said, I often find myself struggling to meet rent and bills, and Allah has blessed me with that. I've always had food, and it always makes a way for me, and I understand I have a better life than many people around the world. But every month is like this. The money comes in and then it goes out. I would like to be more financially secure, not rich but secure enough for a family and not have to worry about bills, if that makes sense. I think it's a very beautiful question. It's a very, very beautiful question. Wallah, this is a topic for a lecture. It would be a beautiful lecture to gather together the ways to increase rizq. Because there are actually many, many ways that are mentioned. Like, for example, the statement of the Prophet ﷺ, من أراد أن يبسط له في رزقه. Whoever wants to have an increase in their rizq and to have a long life, فليصل رحمه, let him keep ties with his family, for example. كما قال صلى الله عليه وسلم. So there are lots and lots of things in this. And I know that Sheikh Dhafar al-Hasan al-Madani, Hafidhahullah, Sheikh Dhafar, he has a lecture on this, was with Kalima before, Kalima Islamic Center in Dubai. He has a lecture on ways to increase your rizq. And I thought I remembered that there are others who have lectures on this topic as well. But what I will try to do, inshallah ta'ala, it's a very beautiful question. I will try to save this question, and if Allah makes it easy for us to do a proper lecture on the different ways of increasing your rizq, I will try to do that, inshallah, because it's a big question with lots of things that are mentioned in the Sunnah. Positives and negatives, as in things you can do in a positive way, and also things you can look out for that might be limiting your rizq. Like, for example, the hadith of the man, ثم ذكر رجلا يطيل السفر أشعث أغبر يمد يديه إلى السماء. Like the man who was dusty and disheveled on a long journey, and he raised his hands up to the sky and he said, Ya Rabb, Ya Rabb, my Lord, my Lord. But his food was haram, and his drink was haram, and his clothing was haram. وغذي بالحرام, and he was nourished from the haram. فأنا يستجاب له. How will he be answered? So there are, things that you have to avoid and things you have to do. No doubt when you are trustworthy and honest in the dealings that you do, and you're careful that your money is halal, this brings a barakah. And there are also two separate aspects to the question as well, which is, one is increasing your rizq in itself, and the other one is barakah in your rizq. Because what a lot of people have, they have plenty of money in terms of actual money that you count, but the barakah doesn't seem to be there. Like the person mentioned, it just seems that the money just comes in and goes out. So this is something that I would like to make a proper lecture about, inshallah ta'ala, and gather together some of the ahadith. Until then, I would advise the questioner to research. Go and research this matter. Look at the lectures online and gather together. I have some notes from Sheikh Dhafar's lecture, because Sheikh Dhafar's lecture was in Urdu, but there was a brief translation in English. Maybe if the questioner can speak Urdu, they can go directly to Sheikh Dhafar's lecture, Sheikh Dhafar al-Hasan. He has a lecture on this. But if they don't speak that language, there was a summary of it in English, where someone summarized the points that Sheikh brought about the means to increase your rizq. So I will try my best to make it for a lecture topic in the future. Watching movies and praising a character which is obviously considered a deity in other cultures, and that character is even referred to as a god in the movie, like Thor from Norse mythology, has been popularized in present day movies. Would praising such a character and saying he's my favorite be considered shirk? Certainly I would fear for a person who says this. Well, I don't feel whether I should say that it's shirk, like definitely you fear. Wallah, you fear for a person. You fear for a person who is attracted to the other people when they make partners with Allah Azza wa Jal. Okay, now I don't know whether it comes under shirk. I don't know the answer to that, but I certainly don't feel safe for that person when they have that hope and that love and that care, or that praiseworthy, they praise of characters that are set up to be gods besides Allah Azza wa Jal. Rather, praising characters in movies mutlaqan, in general, is a bad thing. But to praise one that is from a culture where it is worshipped as a god besides Allah, this is a very, very serious situation for a Muslim to be in. Allah Azza wa Jal knows best. Okay, this is a question. I'm a dentist. In my job, if a patient cannot afford a private treatment up front, the practice can offer them finance. For the patient, it consists of monthly payments, interest-free, for an agreed time period. The procedure is that the dentist has to pay the finance company a small percentage of the total treatment fee, as if we are paying the interest for the patient. Is this permissible for me? As a dentist, a requirement of my job is to offer the patients all options. My other concern is that I'm getting the patient into debt, committing them to pay a monthly fee. I will look into this a bit more detail. This question, I think it needs a bit more, I'll save it, inshallah, to look into in a bit more detail, because I think that this question requires, there are situations in which something like that could be acceptable, and there are situations where it couldn't. So I want to just go through it again and take a little bit more time on that and get back to you in the next session, inshallah. Is it recommended to recite Surah Al-Mulk? Yes, it's recommended to recite Surah Al-Mulk. Can I recite it before Maghrib for the day and the night? What we know of Surah Al-Mulk is that you recite it before you go to sleep, inshallah ta'ala. This is what we know of Surah Al-Mulk, that you recite it. The sunnah is to recite it before you go to sleep, and Allah Azza wa Jalla knows best. Once the time for suhoor is over, Fajr has started, and there is food stuck between the teeth, would it break the fast to swallow this? If it's deliberate, yes. But if it's not deliberate, and a person can't help it, like they cleaned their teeth and accidentally something went down their throat, the person is not blamed for what's not deliberate. But a person who deliberately swallows it, like they take the food out of their mouth and they swallow it after the time of Fajr, then this breaks the fast, and Allah Azza wa Jalla knows best. Does cleaning a child's genitalia break the wudu? Well, this is what I remember Sheikh Abdul Muhsin al-Abbad, from Sheikh Abdul Muhsin al-Abbad, that he said to us that it breaks the wudu. And Some of the scholars mentioned that it doesn't, because the hadith says whoever touches their own private parts. But what I recall, that I remember from Shaykh Abdul Muhsin, Hafidhullah Ta'ala, is that he said that it breaks the wudu. And I think this is the safest of the opinions, that if a person touches their own private parts, or they clean their children after they went to the toilet, it's safer for them to make wudu after that. If someone's praying Maghrib and accidentally gives taslim on the second rak'ah, what should he do? He realizes the mistake immediately after the taslim. So he said, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. So now what the person should do is stand up and continue their prayer. Because what they've done is, they have added a taslim to the prayer. They haven't shortened the prayer. What they've actually done is, they've added the taslim to the prayer. They've actually made the taslim, they've added it into the prayer when they shouldn't have. So they stand up and continue praying. They stand up and they continue praying. And after they have finished their prayer, and they have made Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah, they make sujood al-sahw 2 raka'at. And then they give the salam again. And Allah Azza wa Jalla knows best. There was something I was going to look for in this. No. No, that's correct. The person, if there's not a long time has passed, the person stands up and they continue the prayer, and then they make sujood al-sahw, that's 2 raka'at of 2 sajdas after the salam, and then they make salam again. What do I do if my parents and family participate in events such as celebrating birthdays, Prophet's birthday, do extra ibadah on the 15th of Sha'ban? My mum's response is their elders did it, and then sends me Pakistani scholars encouraging such celebrations. Another question I have is that most Pakistani households do dua every Thursday on food. There has to be a glass of water and a sweet dish on the table. I found no proof that this is a practice of the Prophet ﷺ. Is there any evidence for this? I always question things they said, since my grandma told me shaitan urinates on a woman's head if she doesn't wear a scarf. I'm trying to separate culture from Islam, not only for myself but for my family. So it's a very, very good question, and we ask Allah Azza wa Jal to bless you in that, because it's so important for us as Muslims that we understand the reason we're doing something. We understand that we have an evidence for what we do. Following our forefathers blindly is not praiseworthy. That's why Allah Azza wa Jal told us, وَإِذَا قِيلَ لَهُمُ اتَّبِعُوا مَا أَنزَلَ اللَّهُ قَالُوا بَلْ نَتَّبِعُ مَا أَلْفَيْنَا عَلَيْهِ آبَاءَنَا. If it's said to them, follow what Allah revealed, they said, no, we follow what we found our fathers doing. And the Prophet ﷺ said in the hadith of Aisha radiallahu anha, مَنْ عَمِلَ عَمَلًا لَيْسَ عَلَيْهِ أَمْرُنَا فَهُوَ رَدٌّ. Whoever does an action that's not in accordance with what we've brought, it will be rejected. So it's really important for us to distinguish between culture and between Islam. And many times when we look at something, we actually see that none of the scholars of Islam, the mainstream scholars of Islam, actually told you to do that thing. And it's something that came from a different group or a sect. Like this issue of the dua over the food. What we know of this on a Thursday is that this came from one of the innovated groups in Islam, that their leader made a wasiyah. And his wasiyah, in his will, he made a wasiyah that people should provide food for me every Thursday, and the food should be like the du'as should be made, or some kind of khatam should be done for me every Thursday. And it may have other reasons for it as well. So this is from the things which may even reach the level of a shirk billahi azza wa jal, making a partner with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the worst cases, where people actually sacrifice food to their sheikh. And they actually give the food and they sacrifice it, like they sacrifice an animal to their sheikh, and then they gather that food together on a Thursday and they make dua to him. And so this is in the extreme examples. And in other examples, it might reach the level of innovation. So the matter is really serious, and a person has to really be careful about it. But at the same time, we have to treat our families in the best possible way. And that's why Allah Azza wa Jal said, وَإِن جَاهَدَاكَ عَلَىٰ أَن تُشْرِكَ بِمَا لَيْسَ لَكَ بِهِ عِلْمٍ فَلَا تُطِعْهُمَا وَصَاحِبْهُمَا فِي الدُّنْيَا مَعْرُوفًا. And if they command you to, or they force you, and they pressure you to make a partner with me in that which you have no knowledge of, don't obey them, but accompany them in this world in the best way. So it's not allowed for us to be nasty to our parents, even if they tell you to celebrate the Prophet's birthday, or they force you to make a partner with Allah and they put pressure on you. Then you still can't be rude to them or unkind to them, but try to explain to them so you can correct them, inshallah. And again, I understand a lot of times what happens is their scholars, our scholars, and all the scholars get sent against each other. My sheikh said, your sheikh said. So here we want to start with a principle for them and tell them the principle we have in Islam, أقوال العلماء يحتج لها لا يحتج بها. The statements of the scholars in Islam. Now I know your first reaction might be, the person you sent me was not even a scholar, it's just somebody who's saying evil statements and bid'ah innovations and so on. But even if they were a scholar, the statements of the scholars are not a proof. The statements of the scholars, we find proofs for them. So for example, my sheikh said halal, your sheikh said haram, my sheikh said sunnah, your sheikh said bid'ah. Those things in themselves are not a proof. Neither is my sheikh a proof over yours, nor is your sheikh a proof over mine. But what is a proof is you go back to the evidence of what they said, where they said it from. And that's why the scholars, they don't just give opinions without evidence like that. You don't find the scholars just, the real scholars of Islam. Like so many times people will say, that was, Abu Hanifa said this, Malik said this, Shafi'i said this. But we think like as if Abu Hanifa never explained the reason for it. SubhanAllah, they explained the reason, the evidences, the thought process behind it, because they understood the concept that the statements of the scholars, يُحْتَجُّ لَهَا لَا يُحْتَجُّ بِهَا. They are not an evidence in themselves. The fact that Abu Hanifa, Malik, Shafi'i said something is not an evidence. Rather, it is something you take seriously and respect and look into, but the evidence is al-kitab, was-sunnah, wal-ijma' wal-qiyas al-sahih. The evidence is the Quran and the sunnah and what the ummah has agreed upon and the valid analogies and correct analogies. This is our evidence in Islam. We don't have any other evidence in Islam. So the statements of the scholars, we respect them. And I would recommend that when you're dealing with difficult cases like family like this, you have to respect the scholars. Like you can't be like rude about them. And even though you want to say, who is this jahil, ignorant person who is saying these statements? But you have to give respect to them and be kind. But that doesn't mean you have to agree with what they say. Say, look, may Allah Azza wa Jal forgive the people who made a mistake. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala accept all of our deeds. But ultimately, we're not going to take a statement because a scholar said it. Rather, we're going to look at the evidences, especially in the matters where the scholars differ. So if they say, how are you qualified to answer that? You're not a scholar. We say, no, I'm not a scholar. But there is another scholar who said this is haram. And there is another scholar who said this is allowed. So now we have two scholars who are both scholars who disagree with each other. So if we have two scholars that disagree with each other, now neither of them is a proof against the other. Rather, we look at the evidences for each one and we look at what the evidence indicates. No doubt in the matters, even in the matters of tawheed and shirk, the matters of bid'ah, these are very serious issues. But be patient with your family. Don't be rude to them. Don't make them upset. Don't insult their scholars. Rather, Allah Azza wa Jal prohibited you from insulting the idols that the people worship instead of Allah. Subhanallah, Allah Azza wa Jal prohibited us in the Quran from insulting the idols. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala told us about it, فَيَسُبُّ اللَّهَ عَدَوًا بِغَيْرِ عِلْمٍ. They will then insult Allah without knowledge. It's not that the idols are praiseworthy, but you insult the idol and then the person insults Allah. So in order to safeguard that from happening, what you do is you don't even the idols, Allah Azza wa Jal did not allow them to be insulted if the fear is that the person will insult Allah in return. فَيَسُبُّ اللَّهَ عَدَوًا بِغَيْرِ عِلْمٍ. Then they will insult Allah out of transgression without knowledge. So it's important that even when it comes to their mashayikh and their scholars, just use generic words and so on, but keep the focus on trying to guide that family towards what is good, and understand that individual issues is very hard to debate. Individual issues. Like for me, if my family was celebrating the Mawlid of the Prophet ﷺ, I don't think it's the Mawlid of the Prophet ﷺ that's the issue here. The issue is there have to be usul, there have to be principles that the person is not understanding. Because nobody who understands the basic principles that Islam is built upon could ever celebrate the birthday of the Prophet ﷺ. Like it's impossible. Mustahil, it's impossibility that someone who understands the principles that Islam is built upon could ever celebrate the birthday of the Prophet ﷺ. Mustahil, it's impossible. Rather, the reason they celebrate it is they haven't understood many of the fundamental parts of Islam. So when you debate with them on this, even if you get them to answer, the problem is they're going to do something else tomorrow because they haven't understood the concept. They haven't understood. For example, they haven't understood the concept of bid'ah. That the Prophet ﷺ said, "Man amila amalan laysa alayhi amruna fahuwa rad." Whoever does an action that's not in accordance with what we have brought, it will be rejected. So if a person doesn't understand that concept, it's very hard for them, because you tell them don't celebrate the birthday. Okay, we're not going to celebrate the birthday. First of all, they debate, they argue. Then you prove to them that the only people who celebrate the birthday of the Prophet ﷺ in the history of Islam were the extreme Batini Shia. The extreme Shia, the ones that even the Shia of today consider them to be kafir. They were the ones who started this, the extreme Batiniya. They were the ones who started the celebration of the birthday of the Prophet ﷺ. And that it was never celebrated in the first 400 and whatever years of Islam. It was not celebrated until the Fatimiyun, the Fatimid Caliphate, which was an Ismaili, from the Ismailiyah Shia Caliphate. So this is after the Hijrah. If you have it's hundreds and hundreds of years go by before the celebration of the Prophet's birthday is even known by anybody, and it's not known by anyone. So this is something that a person should, who realizes this, they might say, okay, now we agree with you, we accept it from you. And like we said, 300 years after, around about 300 years after the Hijrah, or more than that. Then subhanAllah, a person realizes this, but then the next day they end up doing something different. And the reason they end up doing something, because they haven't understood the idea that you're not allowed to add acts of worship to the religion that the Prophet ﷺ didn't do. So you have to bring them to that. But then to bring them to that, there are other things, that their hearts are closed to the message of Islam, that they have become attracted to following the shaitan. And so you have to soften their heart with the heart softeners, bring them near to Allah, tell them about Allah's names and attributes, tell them about loving the Prophet ﷺ. From the most amazing things that I personally heard are some of the stories from our Sheikh Abdul Razak al-Abbad. Sheikh Abdul Razak used to tell us in some of the classes about some of the dawah trips that he had done in Africa and other places, where he would, Hafidullah, he would go and he would encounter people who are staunchly against these issues. And staunchly, committing shirk, making partners with Allah in a staunch way. And the Shaykh, he said that how do you get into these people? You have to find something common that they will accept from you, by which you can use it as a vehicle for them to accept the message. So for example, these people will more than happy listen to a lecture about the virtue of dhikr, a lecture about loving the Prophet ﷺ, a lecture about the virtue of as-salatu was-salam ala Rasulillah sallallahu alayhi wasallam, a lecture about loving Allah. They will happily listen to that because they don't see it as a threat to their belief. And what you do is, through those discussions, you introduce Tawheed and Sunnah, al-ittiba', following the Prophet ﷺ, through the general topics like that. So we start and we're going to talk about the dhikr of Allah Azza wa Jal, nothing else. They're like, amazing, we all do dhikr. And they do so much bid'ah in their dhikr, like they do all kinds of innovations in the dhikr they do. But they love dhikr. They love dhikr. And you have to remember, the one who does innovations, generally they do it out of ignorance and out of love. Yani they want to do more for the Prophet ﷺ. They love the Prophet ﷺ, but they're not showing the love properly. Like the poet said, كُلٌّ يَدَّعِ وَصْلًا بِلَيْلَ وَلَيْلَ لَا تُقِرُّ لَهُمْ بِذَاكَ. Everyone claims to be in a relationship with Layla, but Layla doesn't agree with them about that. And it doesn't matter who says they're in love with Layla, it matters who Layla is in love with. It doesn't matter how many people say that I'm the one, but it matters who she chooses. And they use this evidence that even when it comes to the matter of following the Sunnah, it's not the one who claims to follow the Sunnah or claims to love the Prophet ﷺ, but it's the one that the Sunnah agrees with you in that. And it testifies to your love of the Prophet ﷺ. Like in the statement of Allah Azza wa Jal, قُلْ إِن كُنْتُمْ تُحِبُّونَ اللَّهَ فَاتَّبِعُونِ. Say, if you really love Allah, then follow me. So here, again, a lot of people, they do it out of love, out of a desire to worship Allah, get near to Allah, but they're doing it the wrong way. So what you do is talk to them about the dhikr of Allah, the names of Allah, the attributes of Allah. Talk to them about the love of the Prophet ﷺ. Talk to them about stories from the Sahaba. And through that, teach them at-tawheed. Teach them the oneness of Allah. Talk to them about dua, about the virtue of dua and dhikr. And I remember Shaykh Abdul Razak, he recommended the book Fiqh al-Adi'a wal-Adhkar, the fiqh of dua and dhikr. And I did a little series on that called The Power of Dhikr one time. So like, you use these things as a way to approach someone to coming near to Allah. Rather, even the little book Fortress of the Muslim, if you were to give that book to someone and encourage them to read the du'as in it, I believe inshallah that person would come to Tawheed and away from shirk and would leave bid'ah. Because when a person's heart attaches to Allah properly and they realize the proper way to reach Allah Azza wa Jal, any subject you can bring it onto Tawheed and Sunnah and help the person to realize what they're doing. So it's a big project. It's something you have to take it slowly and do it carefully, but don't get angry, don't get frustrated with them. That would be my answer, and Allah Azza wa Jal knows best. So there's the next question is a bit of a long one. I'll mark it to answer later, inshallah, because it needs some research and we don't have too much time left. So, question. In your Aqeedah class, you mentioned that worship includes actions and statements. Does this exclude intentions? No, it doesn't. Probably I was summarizing, but actions are of two types. Three types, sorry. There are three types of action. Action of the heart, action of the tongue, and action of the limbs. And so when we say actions, we mean actions of the heart, which includes intention, actions of the tongue, which includes dhikr, and actions of the limbs, which include prayer and sadaqah and hajj and so on. So the word actions here includes the actions of the heart, which includes intention. What's the correct understanding of of qadr and free will? I'm going to briefly explain, but I'm going to direct you to a lecture, inshallah. I have a lecture on this topic, and the lecture is, it's just type in YouTube Muhammad Tim Qadr, and you'll find the lecture, inshallah ta'ala. But briefly, we're going to say this. All human beings have free will, but your free will is under the will of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That means that you have the choice to decide something. But whether your choice will actually come into reality or not, that is dependent upon the will of Allah. So for example, let me give you a simple example. Today, I had an intention that I was going to read one juz of the Quran, but I didn't read it. So did I have a will? Yes. What was my will? I willed to read a juz of the Quran. Did Allah have a will? Yes. What did Allah will? Allah didn't will for me to read that juz of the Quran. I willed it and Allah didn't will it. So which one happened? What happened is I didn't read it. And that's why Imam al-Shafi'i, he said, مَا شِئْتَ كَانَ وَإِن لَمْ أَشَأْ وَمَا شِئْتُ إِن لَمْ تَشَأْ لَمْ يَكُنْ خَلَقْتَ الْعِبَادَ عَلَى مَا عَلِمْتَ وَفِي الْعِلْمِ يَجْرِي الْفَتَى وَالْمُسِنُ على ذا مننت وهذا خذلت وهذا أعنت وذا لم تعن فمنهم شقي ومنهم سعيد ومنهم قبيح ومنهم حسن. Imam al-Shafi'i said in his poetry, he said, whatever you will happen even if I don't will it. And whatever I will, if you don't will it, it won't happen. And Allah Azza wa Jal said in the Quran, لِمَنْ شَاءَ مِنْكُمْ أَن يَسْتَقِيمُ, for whoever among you wishes to stand straight. So wishing to be upright is possible, it's your will. وَمَا تَشَاءُونَ إِلَّا أَن يَشَاءَ اللَّهُ رَبُّ الْعَالَمِينَ, but you will not be able to do it unless Allah wills it for you, the Lord of the heavens and the earth. طيب. Then a person asks, so what is فَمَا الْعَمَلِ? Like some of the Sahaba, they asked the Prophet ﷺ, they said, is this a matter that is ongoing, أو قد فرغ من, or something that has been finished and decided by Allah? The Prophet ﷺ said, بل أمر قد فرغ من, rather it's a matter that has finished and been decided by Allah Azza wa Jalla. There's nothing left. So some of them, they asked, what shall we do? The Prophet ﷺ said, اعمل, act, فكل ميسر لما خلق له. Everyone will be, أو كما قال, everyone will be made easy what they were created for. So that you should take two things from Qadr. Number one, that you have to work hard. Because Allah Azza wa Jalla said, وَالَّذِينَ جَاهَدُوا فِينَا لَنَهْدِيَنَّهُمْ سُبُلَنَا. Those people who strive hard for us, we will guide them to our ways. And number two, the desperate need you have of Allah Azza wa Jalla. You need Allah. You can't survive without Allah. You can't do anything without Allah. You can't will anything without Allah. So you should take two things. Number one, work really hard. وَالَّذِينَ جَاهَدُوا فِينَا. Those who work hard for us, لَنَهْدِيَنَّهُمْ سُبُلَنَا. We will guide them. And you should realize your need of Allah. أَنْتُمُ الْفُقَرَاءُ إِلَى اللَّهِ وَاللَّهُ هُوَ الْغَنِيُّ الْحَمِيدُ. You are the people in need of Allah. And Allah is Al-Ghani, Al-Hamid. If a person says, I'm a good person, Allah knows what is in my heart, how should we respond? This is no doubt from the talbis iblis, from the fooling of the shaitan, when a shaitan fools a person. And there are many different ways you could respond to this issue, but I think it depends if you have time to explain to someone properly, or if you have if you are struggling for time. But one of the ways I think is to mention two hadith. One is the hadith of Abdullah ibn Umar, that he was approached by a beggar one day. He's Abdullah ibn Umar. He's Abdullah ibn Umar. And Abdullah ibn Umar is a Sahabi who met the Prophet ﷺ. Do you believe Abdullah ibn Umar was a good person? Say yes. Abdullah ibn Umar was a good person. Do you believe that he was from the Sahaba who Allah Azza wa Jalla said, وَكُلًّا وَعَدَ اللَّهُ الْحُسْنَى, all of them Allah promised Jannah? Say yes. He was the son of Umar ibn al-Khattab. Yes. He was close to the Prophet ﷺ. Yes. A beggar approached him one day and said to him, can I have something? he said to his son, give him a dinar. Give him a dinar. So he gave him a dinar. He said, تَقَبَّلَ اللَّهُ مِنْكَ يَا أَبَتِ. Oh my father, may Allah accept it from you. He turned to him, he said, my son, if I knew that Allah accepted one sajda from me or one dirham in sadaqah, I would have wished to die right now. I would wish to die right now. If I knew that Allah accepted one dirham from me or one sajda from me, there would be nothing more preferable to me than death. Do you not hear that Allah said, إِنَّمَا يَتَقَبَّلَ اللَّهُ مِنَ الْمُتَّقِينَ. Allah only accepts from the righteous. And the hadith of Aisha radiallahu anha regarding the tafsir of the statement of Allah Azza wa Jal, وَالَّذِينَ يُؤْتُونَ مَا آتَوْا وَقُلُوبُهُمْ وَجِلَةٌ أَنَّهُمْ إِلَى رَبِّهِمْ رَاجِعُونَ. This ayah, the people who give what they give and their hearts are trembling with fear. Aisha, she thought this is the person. She said, O Messenger of Allah, أَهُمُ الَّذِينَ يَشْرَبُونَ الْخَمَرَ وَيَسْرَقُونَ. She said, are they the people who drink alcohol and steal? The Prophet ﷺ said, Ya la, ya banat as-Siddiq. He said, no, O daughter of as-Siddiq. لكنهم الذين يصومون ويصلون ويتصدقون. They're the people who fast and pray and give charity. وهم يخافون أن لا يقبل منهم. They're scared that Allah will not accept from them. Then you ask the person, how does that behavior of the Sahaba reconcile with what you said? The Sahaba who Allah testified to their righteousness, who Allah said about them, رَضِيَ اللَّهُ عَنْهُمْ وَرَضُوا عَنْهُ. Allah is pleased with them and they are pleased with Him. Who Allah promised paradise to. How can you reconcile the fact that they were so scared of their deeds being accepted that one of them would beg that Allah would only accept a sajda from them, and yet you feel so happy with the state of your heart to say that I'm a good person and Allah knows what's in my heart? Then, subhanallah, a person says that Allah knows what is, Allah Azza wa Jal knows what is in my heart. Allah Azza wa Jal said, and this is even clearer, أَفَأَمِنُوا مَكْرَ اللَّهِ فَلَا يَأْمَنُ مَكْرَ اللَّهِ إِلَّا الْقَوْمُ الْخَاسِرُونَ. In Surah Al-A'raf, do they feel safe from the plot of Allah? Nobody feels safe from the plot of Allah except the disbelieving people. Feeling safe from the plot of Allah is a person who says, I'm a good person, Allah, nothing will happen to me, Allah knows what's in my heart. They're not scared. Then say to them, Allah Azza wa Jal said, أُولَٰئِكَ الَّذِينَ يَدْعُونَ يَبْتَغُونَ إِلَى رَبِّهِمُ الْوَسِيلَةَ أَيُّهُمْ أَقْرَبُ وَيَخَافُونَ وَيَرْجُونَ رَحْمَتَهُ وَيَخَافُونَ عَذَابَهُ. The people who, the prophets and the messengers who are seeking a means of nearness to Allah, which of them is closer? And they hope for His mercy and they fear His punishment. They fear His punishment. They're scared of the punishment of Allah Azza wa Jal. Allah Azza wa Jal said, أَمَّنْ هُوَ قَانِتٌ آنَاءَ اللَّيْلِ ساجدا وقائما يحذر الآخرة ويرجو رحمة ربه قل هل يستوي الذين يعلمون والذين لا يعلمون. Allah Azza wa Jal said in Surah Al-Zumar, as for the one who's standing all night in prayer, in sajda, standing up, fearing what is going to come in the akhirah and hoping for the mercy of their Lord, say are those who know equal to those who don't know. Subhanallah, the person is praying tahajjud at night and they are scared of what will happen to them in the akhirah. And this person, رُبَّمَا لَا يُصَلِّي, maybe doesn't pray at all, and they say, I'm a good person and Allah knows what's in my heart. Subhanallah, after these evidences, there shouldn't be any doubt that the situation of the believer, and this is what Al-Hasan al-Basri, he said, rahimahullah ta'ala. And if you just want to limit and just quote what Al-Hasan al-Basri said, I think it's enough. If you just quote what Al-Hasan al-Basri, he said, rahimahullah ta'ala. Al-Hasan al-Basri, he said, the believer, he said, that the believer does a good deed fearful that it won't be accepted. And the wrongdoer does sins and feels safe that they will not be affected. That's the best I can translate it from memory. That Al-Hasan al-Basri, he said, the believer does good deeds fearing that they will not be accepted. هو مشفق وجل, the person is fearful and shaking and khaif and scared that Allah will not accept it. And the person who is a sinner, they do sins and they don't think that their sins will affect them in anything. They don't feel. Then they do their sins. وَالْفَاجِرْ يَعْصِ اللَّهَ وَهُوَ آمِنٌ, thinking that I'm safe and I have nothing wrong, nothing's going to happen to me. Rather, a person should fear for the things that they've done. And if their issue is my heart is good, then you only need one hadith to reply to this. And that is the hadith of An-Nu'man ibn Bashir, in which the Prophet ﷺ said, أَلَا إِنَّ فِي الْجَسَدِ مُضْغَةً إِذَا صَلَحَتْ صَلَحَ الْجَسَدُ كُلُّهُ وَإِذَا فَسَدَتْ فَسَدَ الْجَسَدُ كُلُّهُ أَلَا وَهِيَ الْقَلْبُ. In the body there's a piece of flesh. If it is correct, the body will be correct. Meaning, if your heart is good, your body is good. If your heart is good, you pray your prayers. If your heart is good, you fulfill the commands of Allah. If your heart is good, you don't disobey Allah. وَإِذَا فَسَدَتْ فَسَدَ الْجَسَدُ كُلُّهُ. And if your heart is bad, then the signs of that show on your body. أَلَا وَهِيَ الْقَلْبُ. This is the heart. So ultimately, there is a link between the inner self and the outer self. If your heart is pure, your actions will be pure. And if your actions are not pure, then don't kid yourself that your heart is pure. Because the reason your actions are foul is because your heart is foul. That's the reality of the situation, what the Prophet ﷺ told us in the hadith of An-Nu'man ibn Bashir. What's the ruling on, and I'm just going to go till 9 o'clock, I'm going to stop because we have Maghrib here in Newcastle at around about 12 past, 13 past, something like that. So it's we'll stop at 9 o'clock inshallah. What's the ruling on uploading and sharing Islamic books and PDFs? Would this break copyright rules? I think copyright is something which is given acceptance in Islam, because the Prophet ﷺ said, "Al-Muslimuna ala shurutihim." Muslims are required to follow the conditions that they set out for themselves. And the Prophet ﷺ said, "Kullu shartin laysa fi kitabillahi fahuwa batil." Every condition that's not in accordance with the Book of Allah is invalid. There is nothing about copyright that is invalid. There is nothing about copyright that is invalid or goes against the Quran. So we say al-Muslimuna ala shurutihim. The Muslims have to follow their conditions. There are obviously copyright expires. There are works. I don't think it's correct to copyright something that is a classical work. Like someone, for example, they copyright a book from a Shafi'i or something like that. Like that's not correct. But their own efforts, yes, what they've done, like they did work on the book, or they did corrections, or they did footnotes, then I think this is copyright should be applied here. The people should follow the conditions that they agree to. Is the water that remains from a cat pure? I've read conflicting narrations from the Prophet ﷺ and the companions. Yes, it's pure inshaAllah ta'ala. The Prophet ﷺ said, إِنَّمَا هِيَ مِنَ الطَّوَّافِينَ عَلَيْكُمْ أو قال الطوافات. He said it's only they are from those animals that just go around. They just go around you. Like they're always around you in the house. So these are animals that the water that remains from them is pure. And some of the Sahaba, radiyallahu anhum wa ardahum, made wudu from the water that was licked by a cat. And Allah knows best. What's the ruling on circumcision for a convert? Circumcision is wajib. It's an obligation. According to the stronger opinion among the scholars, that circumcision is a wajib because of the principle مَا لَا يَتِمُّ الْوَاجِبُ إِلَّا بِهِ فَهُوَ wajib. Whatever you can't complete a wajib from it, it in itself becomes wajib. So no doubt this is it's from the wajibat. They have to do it at the earliest possible time, because the Prophet ﷺ said, "ما أمرتكم به فأتوا منه ما استطعتم وما نهيتكم عنه فاجتنبوه." The Prophet ﷺ said, "Whatever I command you to do as much of it as you can, and whatever I prohibit you from, stay away from it." So a person does it at the earliest possible opportunity, and they see it as a wajib from the wajibat, an obligation. But if the person wasn't able to do it for a while because of some difficulties, the hospital, they couldn't get appointment, or they had to save money for it, they didn't have enough money, then inshallah ta'ala their prayer is accepted and so on until then, because a person can only do what is in their ability. وَلَا يُكَلِّفُ اللَّهُ نَفْسًا إِلَّا وُسْعَهَا. Allah doesn't burden a person with more than they can bear. There's another very good question about the praying in the jilbaab. I'm going to deal with that in the next session, inshallah ta'ala. One more question or two. We'll take one more question. The question is, what should I do when I see my parents telling a lie to someone? So obviously, telling a lie is a major sin. So here, what you need to do is you need to approach them. I would recommend that you approach them privately. If it's possible for you to deal with it publicly in a way that doesn't make things worse. For example, sometimes you can quietly correct someone. Like for example, they said, oh, yeah, I went yesterday. You say, oh, Mum, subhanAllah, it wasn't yesterday. It was 2 days ago. Do you remember? And then you corrected them by that. Alhamdulillah. If it's not possible because you fear that the situation will get worse, and then they turn around to you and they say, no, you're the one who's lying, and then it becomes it becomes worse, then privately talk to them and say, Mom, I think that when you said that thing, it wasn't like that. SubhanAllah, we should tell the truth, and lying is something that's not allowed in Islam, and so on. So I think that if you can correct them on the spot, that's the best thing to do, if it's not going to create a worse situation. But if it's going to create a worse situation, then you correct them in private, in the best way that you can, and Allah Azza wa Jalla knows best. So we reached up to number 160. So subhanAllah, we're getting through them. If it so happens that next week is Eid, we will not probably do the Q&A on that day. But if it's not Eid, like if Eid was the day before that, then inshallah ta'ala we will try to do the Q&A as normal, inshallah ta'ala, next week. So let me see if there were some questions that were on the list here. So they were saying the sound was low. Maybe, usually the sound is automatic. That was my fault that I wasn't able to look at it. Usually the sound, I have it plugged into my Rode, and the sound level is really good on here. So maybe I just had some setting wrong. I'll have a look at it for next time, inshallah. So if you have a child and then the father reverts to Islam but the mother doesn't, and he leaves and says that he has to forget his past life and doesn't help to raise his son, is this true in Islam? No, if the father reverts to Islam, if any of the two parents revert to Islam, the child should be brought up as a Muslim. That's the first point. If any of the two children, or if any of the two parents become a Muslim, then the child should be brought up in Islam. And no doubt in Islam that we are commanded to take our responsibilities, and the father should try to keep the ties with that child of theirs that was from the time before they reverted to Islam. That's what comes apparent to me, and Allah Azza wa Jalla knows best. So inshallah ta'ala we'll stop it, the class there, and inshallah ta'ala we will try to continue next week, unless it is Eid day. If it's Eid day, we'll miss a week and continue the week after. And Allah Azza wa Jalla knows best. Wassalatu wassalamu ala nabiyyina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in.